Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
Hey everybody, we're back with another episode. Today's guest is Sara Hendershot. Sara grew up as the oldest of 4 siblings in Simsbury, Connecticut. She played many sports growing up and tried rowing at Simsbury High School, where she was immediately hooked. She was recruited to row at Princeton University, where her collegiate career peaked during her senior season when she was named captain of the team, rowed an undefeated dual season, a third-place finish at NCAAs, and was named first-team All-American. Upon graduation, Sara turned down an offer on Wall Street to continue rowing at the elite level. Her national team accomplishments include a 2010 U23 gold medal in the women's 4, a 2011 senior team gold medal in the women's 4, and a 4th-place finish in the 2012 Olympic Games in the women's pair. Following London, Sara committed to training for another Olympic cycle, but unfortunately was plagued with injury for almost 2 years. She ultimately chose to leave the USRowing Training Center in search of health and peak performance. Her journey has led her around the world, where she has been fortunate enough to work with different coaches, pair partners, and training programs, and has improved her fitness, rowing skill, and understanding of the human body. Sit back, relax, and enjoy Sara's story and journey. Sara Hendershot, thank you for coming onto the podcast this afternoon. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on it.
Awesome. So let's kick things off. Let's have you talk a little bit about your background into the sport of rowing and your entry point.
Sure. So I was an athlete growing up, and basically when I was in high school, I was looking for a spring sport. Did not have one, and a few people suggested that I try out rowing because I was tall and I had been a swimmer. So it was kind of a transition from another endurance sport. And I wandered down to the boathouse at Simsbury High School and pretty much was hooked from day one. Loved that whole experience in high school, was able to row all 4 of my spring seasons, and then was recruited to row in college and ended up going to Princeton to row. And had a great experience there as well under Coach Lori Dauphiny. Kind of my career there was peaked as a senior when I was the captain of the team, and we came in 3rd at NCAAs, and that was really where I kind of saw the chance that I could continue to row and try to do it on the elite level. And so I decided to give it a go for the under-23 team upon graduation, and went and did that, made the women's 4 at the under-23 team. We brought home gold that summer, and then right after that, I joined up with the senior national team that was training out of Princeton. So I didn't have to move. I just stayed there and ended up training with them for the 2 years leading up into London. And that within that time, I got to go to the 2011 World Championships in Bled and race the women's 4 there. We brought home gold, and then was able to make the Olympic team in the lead up to 2012 in the women's pair, and we finished in 4th. So that was a very close to a medal and kind of heartbreaking. So it sucked me in for another cycle. And within this last cycle, I've had a lot of changes because I was getting injured a ton. So basically it turned into, do I either stop rowing or do I try to find a different way to get healthy and continue on? And my only option I saw for being able to continue on was to go do something different. So I left the training center basically in search of a way to get healthy, and I found that. It's been a process, but I found it. And for the last 2 years, I've been totally healthy. I'm now hitting PRs on the erg. I think I'm rowing better than I've ever rowed before. And this journey has led me back into the pair with my pair partner from 2012. We're together again, and we are gearing up for the National Selection Regatta at the end of the month to go race the pair.
Awesome. Well, for sure, good luck. Kick some butt at the NSR. Be rooting for you.
Thank you.
So you made that change after the 2012 games, and you said it was a priority. You needed to get healthy. Could you talk a little bit about some of the injuries you experienced, and then, the steps you started taking to correct those?
Sure. So I fractured a rib in the Olympic year in 2012, was out for most of the middle of that winter, trying to heal it and get healthy. And so that was tough because I was basically sitting on the bike and watching these girls train as we're trying to get ready for the Olympics, and I was seeing the clock tick along, and I had to get back as quickly as I could. So I did get back as quickly as I could. I ended up making the team, but I was pretty much in pain the whole way through London. It just wasn't fully recovered. And I think a lot of that had to do with me just moving poorly and loading the wrong areas of my body when I was taking the rowing stroke. So I didn't realize how much pressure I was actually putting on my ribs, how much pressure I was putting in the surrounding muscles. And then after London, I actually did not have a rib problem. I had a hip issue, which was misdiagnosed by a ton of different doctors as a lower back problem. I almost was convinced to get surgery for a disc, which it ended up not being. And I chose not to do that because I kind of had this gut feeling that it wasn't a disc and that I wanted to go the more restorative route rather than just try to get an easy, quick fix. And the only thing that actually got me pain-free was when I went out to California and I started working with Brian McKenzie and Aaron Cafaro, and they essentially highlighted all of the terrible ways I was moving and the fact that I was so quad dominant and I was not using my glutes or my hips properly at all. And pretty much within 2 weeks of starting to move better, all my pain went away. And it was amazing, but also frustrating because I was kicking myself in the butt saying, like, I've been hurting for almost 12 months on and off, and all I had to do was move better. So, I mean, that was actually exciting, and that really was when the light went off in my head, and I realized there's so much more potential to be unlocked if I just understand what my body is supposed to be doing instead of going out there and taking junk strokes one after another and allowing my body to just slowly wear down.
Yeah, that sounds like you really identified some of the things that were really the underlying issues, from some of the misdiagnoses, and then have really changed up your training to effectively not only enhance your performance, but your health has improved drastically as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that was what I left the training center for, because I realized if I can't row, then I can't train, right? So I have to get to the point where I can actually take rowing strokes, be comfortable, feel strong, and this is kind of what led me to that point.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm really happy to hear that you're happy, healthy, and the training is going really well. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. So, kind of building upon that. So what are some of the things that you're doing differently now in terms of, on the endurance end for rowing, both in the boat and on the erg, and then on the strength training side of things to make sure that those injuries don't pop up again?
Well, where do you want me to start? Because almost everything is different.
Well, just start from the beginning.
Okay, so I think once I started to realize that it was that movement pattern that mattered, it was all about basically reteaching my body to move and getting a much deeper body awareness, so that I would be able to tell myself when I was moving correctly instead of always needing a coach there to give me a cue. And that meant bring the volume way down, because what I was doing before was just going out there and checking the box, basically saying, okay, I need to get 18K in today. It needs to be steady state. I'm just going to do it. And it didn't matter how it was done. And I think that's relatively typical for training at that level. And this was a great opportunity for me I was bringing the volume down probably from around those like 18, 20, 22K steady state rows to 8, 10, 12K, because my body couldn't hold the position for longer than that. And it wasn't until I earned the volume that we allowed me to build it back. And that's really how we looked at it. You had to earn the volume. You had to get to the point where you could sustain good form, and then you could continue to add more. So that was really the first step, was trying to ingrain that movement. And a lot of that was done in the boat. Some of it was done on the erg, but a ton of it was done in the gym. And I think that's where this was unique, is because a lot of it had to do with learning how to load my hips, learning how to use my glutes, and actually understanding how much the core is involved in the rowing stroke. All of that came in from the gym. And there were a lot of great movements that we relied on to feel that and to ingrain it. So the gym became an important factor. I'd say that my schedule pretty much changed from, instead of doing 2 rows every day and sometimes doing 3 rows, we were doing 1 row a day. And now we've built up to doing 2 rows a day, 3 times a week. But that's all that I've really felt is necessary. It doesn't need to be more than that for me at this point, because the quality of my strokes and of my sessions is so much higher that as long as we're getting in what we need to during those sessions, it doesn't need to be about going out and just getting more and more and more, because I've started to realize that more is not better always. And 3 really solid sessions in the gym per week. That's kind of the number that we've come up with, that is a happy medium. We went a lot more than that in the beginning, and now I've found that 3 is really a good number. But that being the focus, trusting that I can get fitness in ways that are not just long, slow distance, and then really just trying to ingrain these good patterns. But that's one of the most exciting things I've noticed as well, is that I am fitter than I was before doing a long, slow distance approach, and I'm healthier and rowing better.
That's incredible. Absolutely awesome. So would it be accurate to say that one of the major changes in your training is you put a huge emphasis on quality over the volume?
Quality and skill, because the rowing stroke is a skill. Just in the same way that really any athletic movement is. I think people forget that even running is a skill, and that if you just go out there and turn your brain off and slog through it, you're going to probably just go to what your natural movement patterns are based on however many repetitions you've done in that way. And so having a little bit more of an intention behind how I'm going to take the stroke, and treating it like it's a skill, like dropping the blade in the water is a skill, and timing that up correctly. And then using your core is a skill, rather than just shoving your legs down as hard as you can and doing it in a disconnected way. So yes, I would say quality and skill has been a really big part of the way that we approach training.
I love it. It's so cool to hear you say that. I can tell, just like I imagine you out there on the water rowing, and it's just it's a mindful practice. You're engaged and thinking about every stroke, and it's one at a time rather than ticking off the meters for the entire session.
Yes, and the greatest part that's made me so excited is that I feel like I have so much more body weight and power to recruit within the stroke when I'm moving this way. I was not using my full body weight at all the way that I used to row. I think I was using a lot of my muscle. I was very strong, and I, had ingrained this pattern that had become pretty fast. But now, when we're doing it right, when we're taking the stroke properly, it feels so much more effortless. You just recruit 20 to 30% more energy because you're using your body weight and you're connecting to the boat and to the oar so much more efficiently that there's a lot less slip and there's a lot less inefficiency.
That's amazing. Very cool. So that's definitely going to be translating to some fast boat speed right there.
Yeah, I hope so. You know what? We've been seeing a lot of good speed. I think the biggest key right now is executing on the day that matters. And that's a tough thing to do as well. You know, Sarah and I have done it before, but we have to do it now in a very different situation where we're kind of coming in as outsiders. And, you know, I think something that I miss a lot about the training center, and that is such a great positive about this group, is that these women are all so strong and competitive, and every day there's some form of competition. So you get really, really good at just having your butt on the line constantly. And, you know, I'm confident in our ability to do that now, but that's something that we've got to show up and do when it matters.
For sure. Yeah. Well, like I said before, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at the NSR, and I'll be watching for sure.
Thanks.
So kind of building upon that, you definitely talked a lot about the strength side of things. So have you made technical changes too in the boat, like in terms of how you approach the rowing stroke or think about the technical nuances compared to, you know, say 4 or 5 years ago?
Definitely. I think one of the coolest things about the work that we're doing in the gym is that there will be moments where we stop after a long trip in the boat and we'll turn to each other and we'll say, that felt just like when we were squatting the other day in the gym. Like, didn't you feel that same way that we loaded our hips? So there's always little crossovers like that. And I think that's what's been really cool, is that we can notice load sequencing as a big translator. And can also just feel like we're using those same muscles in the gym. So a lot of the actual exercises that we choose to use to help our strength are ones where you have to use your core. So any kind of back squat, front squat, overhead squat, deadlift, all those things feel very similar to the way that I pick up the catch in the boat and then push using those muscles.
I love it. It's awesome. Very cool. I hope everybody listening is seeing some of the carryover or connecting the dots between the carryover. So can you talk a little bit more? You've definitely hit on some of the exercises that you're doing, and your strength training about 3 days a week. So what does a typical session look like for you? I've followed you somewhat on Instagram, so I know that you have some very specifically, warm up routines, mobility wise for your body, for your needs and everything.
So I would say that we have adapted a sort of similar to CrossFit kind of style in our weightlifting. And I say that just because our movements are constantly varied, and it's about hitting those top high intensity moments in the gym. And I think the way that we've used our gym has been to complement our rowing as the progression has gone on throughout the year. So in the beginning of the year, we were really slowing things down in the boat, trying to make sure that we were working on technical things, that we were hitting these lower rates, that we were getting some longer pieces in. And because of that, we weren't hitting as much top end on the water. And we used the gym to do that instead. So anytime that we were in the gym, we would do some strength work, but we would also make sure that we were doing like WOD type workouts at the end where you're just burning yourself out. You're burning your lungs, and you're doing that using different exercises and holding good form, but allowing yourself to hit that top end. And now that we're approaching race season, that kind of work in the gym has slowly come down a little bit because we're doing a lot more intensity on the water, and we're now using the gym for more strength-related just maintenance and continuing to make sure that that power is there. But we don't always have to touch those top-end WODs. But I would say that a typical workout in the gym for us looks like it's like a 30 to 45-minute warm-up where we are getting warm, doing a lot of mobility. That's been something that I have made a huge part of my routine because it's allowed me to stay healthy, and because it's hugely empowering to know that you can actually take care of your own body and that you don't need to live on a physical therapist's table in order to survive. That was what I used to do. So now by adding in that mobility before weight session, we also do it at home and after rows and stuff like that. But that really helps us to stay loose, helps us to hit those positions that we're trying to hit in the gym. We'll usually do some kind of an every minute on the minute type of a circuit as part of our warm up, and then we'll move into some strength training movements, and it'll be probably 2 or 3 movements that we pick for that day, whether it's an overhead squat or good morning or front squat or deadlift or sumo deadlift, something like that. We'll do usually about 2 or 3 exercises, and somewhere between 70 to 95% of your 1 rep max within that session, and then following that we'll do some sort of a WOD. So that would be anywhere between 4 and 30 minutes of work using different movements, whether that's the erg. Sometimes the erg's in there. Sometimes we run. Sometimes there'll be double unders, body weight movements like pull-ups and push-ups, any kind of kettlebell movement. We add those in a lot. Box jumps, wall balls, all kinds of things like that are usually thrown into our WODs. And it'll depend, again, on how we're complementing our rowing. So you'll do a nice long one if you haven't done as many long sessions on the water, or a short one if you've done more 5K type work on the water that week. And then we'll finish up with accessory work, anything else that we want to touch on keeping strong, and then core, and then more mobility. And so our gym sessions last anywhere between like 90 minutes to just over 2 hours. So they're solid. They're definitely, they're not in and out. We take our time. But the coolest thing, I think, is that when I can sometimes go into a gym session and feel kind of tired or sluggish, and after I leave, I almost always feel rejuvenated and have more energy. And I think it's something about lifting heavy things just resets your nervous system. It is, it resets your nervous system. It's probably like a little shot of testosterone that like just kind of resets me and always makes my next session better.
So that's really cool to hear you say that. So there's like one of the sayings or kind of principles from Strong First is that a strength training session, when you leave that, it should give you more than it takes away. You should feel better walking out the door than you did when you walked in the door. Yeah,
I would say that's pretty much how we're feeling.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
So one thing that like I heard across the board there was moving, mobility. You're varying up the types of movements you're doing. So you're not, staying in one plane of motion, which is super important because as a rower, we tend to stay on the ergometer. We tend to stay more just in the sagittal plane, flexion and extension. And then in the boat, you're hitting all 3, but you're only rotating to one side. So that complementary work that you're doing on land in the gym really helps to even out and balance the body.
Absolutely. And a lot of our programming is done with exactly that intent. So we do specifically counter-rotational work. That's part of our accessory stuff. Turn to the other side. Turn to the way that you don't always turn so that you can be maybe a little bit less lopsided. We can work on straightening ourselves out. And I think that by doing these varied movements, by bringing you outside of that one plane, it's actually just increased my athleticism. Like, I think I grew up being a relatively athletic kid, and then as I specialized, some of that went away. You kind of just get so good at one thing that you lose the ability to have some more of that spatial awareness. And I think somebody even like Sarah Zelenka, my partner right now, is a really cool example of that because I pulled her out of retirement. She had retired. She was coaching for 3 years. She had stayed in shape, but very different shape. She was running and doing like much more endurance work. And I basically threw her into this kind of training about 10 months ago now. And within 6 months, I would say, she was starting to hit PR speed again and moving so much differently than I've ever seen her move, because she was told over and over, like, you are an endurance athlete. You're not a power person. You don't have fast twitch. you are good at low, slow aerobic stuff. And that was just like what she believed. And by varying this movement, by varying the energy systems that were challenging on a regular basis, she has become this completely more well-rounded athlete. And just the way that her body moves in the gym is just so confident, not in a way like, oh, I might get hurt because I don't know how to arrange my limbs in this position. And it's been a really cool thing to see.
It's awesome. I'm not there, but if I was, I can tell because there's like so much enthusiasm and energy coming through in your voice. That's really cool. So what you touched on there made me think of something. So are you at all familiar with, have you heard of Ido Portal at all?
No.
So he's got this really good quote, but he goes, we're movers first, we're humans second, and we're specialists third. And that's the hierarchy, right? And so that's exactly kind of what you just laid out, is that even though our sport is rowing and we spend the majority of our time training in our sport for competition, we still need to remember that we're a human being and we need to move, and we need to move a lot at a high quality, and we need to vary up that movement.
Yeah, and I think that we've done a good job at achieving that balance of being rowers, but of also prioritizing good movement. Because I think that doing those things actually makes you a better rower when you're doing it properly. But there is a line. Like there is a point where sometimes I can see myself wanting to try and experiment with things that would be great if I was a CrossFitter, but I'm not a CrossFitter right now. And so I have to kind of remind myself that, I will learn to do handstand walks, and I'll get better at Olympic lifting and legless rope climbs and things like that when I am done with rowing and I decide to go on to something else and challenge myself in a different way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with trying that stuff now. Sometimes I do, but just remembering that there is a finite amount of time in the day that I can commit towards training, because recovery is so important. So I have to pull back sometimes and make sure that I am giving myself the time to recover. But that the stuff that I do in the gym is going to make me a better rower because we choose those movements specifically, and because the intent is always, I'm doing this so that I can row better. I'm learning the skill so that I can translate it to the blade.
It's awesome. I love it. It's great. I continually love how you come back, and it's always complimentary, and the focus is always on improving and enhancing the rowing stroke. And it's not just on the fitness and performance side, but also on the skill side.
It is because, the skill unlocks a whole nother level of fitness that you can then display. Because there are a lot of athletes that I know that have insane through-the-roof fitness, and they can't put it on the oar. They can't put it on the blade. So it's like, what's the point of that? Like, awesome. I'm so glad that you can pull this insane number on the erg, but if it's not going to show up on the water, then what's the point? So by unlocking this skill of actually understanding how your body connects to a weight, and that's what it is in the boat, really. It's understanding what the weight of the boat is, understanding how quickly or firmly you can push against that blade so that you don't slip. And when you can figure that out, then your fitness is actually being translated to speed. I try to do my best at that every day. So we're getting better.
Awesome. Very cool. So, most of the movements that you train with on the strength training side, are you focused primarily on the barbell? Do you use kettlebell? I know you said body weight was in there, but is there sort of, something across the board that's in all the lifts that you do?
I would say it's a healthy mix. We use the bar a good amount. We use kettlebells to try to create more instability, because they're harder to balance and to get overhead than just a bar. We do body weight work when a weight would limit our ability to move fast, and I would say it's definitely a very healthy mix. It's trying to hit all those different areas.
Very cool. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, So how has your approach overall changed, from 10 years ago compared to today? Meaning, like, not just in terms of what you're doing, but sort of your perspective as an athlete.
So let's think. 10 years ago, I was a freshman in college. Wow. So I think my approach definitely on the sport of rowing at that point was I'm going to be tougher and I'm going to work harder than everybody around me. And that's how I'm going to get ahead. And that's what's going to make me win races. And to an extent, that works. And I think when you're young, that's not such a bad thing because it's a practiced skill. Again, I think being tough and using that toughness when you need it in situations. And I think my coach in college, Lori Dauphiny, actually taught me how to be tough in a lot of situations, which was really cool. But I would definitely look at more is better at that point. I was adding in a lot of workouts on my own to try to get an edge on the teammates that we were competing for spots in the boat with. And I just kind of decided when I was on the starting line next to other collegiate competitors and I'd look across, like, I'm going to be tougher than you, and that's how I'm going to win. And I think that that's still something that needs to be there now. And so 10 years later, I still do that. I still will look out of the boat and say, I'm going to be tougher than you. But at the same time, I think throughout training, I've learned just a lot more about how to be smart because more is definitely not always better. I've learned to understand my body a lot more as far as movement, but also as far as rest and recovery. Like, I can tell when I need to pull back or when I'm fatigued, but I can still push for more. And I think that's an important balance to kind of learn, and that just comes with maturity and figuring out that fine line between training hard and overtrained. And you can learn that the hard way through injury, and I definitely did. But I think just by getting this kind of like more maturity and more strokes under your belt, you realize when it's important to go hard and when it's important to pull back. Even my first couple of years on the national team, I was just banging my head against a wall during steady state rows because I thought it was all about having your bow ball ahead no matter what. Like, you want to prove to the older girls that you belong to be there, that you know how to move a boat, so you're just going to go hard to show that, when really those are not the rows that you want to expend yourself on. You want to use that opportunity to get better at rowing, to improve your stroke, and then show up on the day when you're being selected or the day that you're going hard and you're racing, and that actually matters.
Awesome. So how do you improve your rest and recovery now?
I would say probably my number one change has been my diet. It's been huge change. I can't believe how terribly I used to eat. I had no idea. Like, I really had no idea. For a while, I thought I was eating really healthily, and I can't get over how much more energy I have eating this way now.
Wow.
So I don't think there's a one size fits all for everybody. But I am sort of an adapted paleo, I guess, at this point, just because I've cut grains and I still do eat dairy, so that's something that's different. But just very clean, really low sugar intake, really big on fruit or on vegetables, on high quality meats, on a little bit of a higher fat diet than I ever did before, and realizing that when I'm fatigued, it usually means that I haven't had enough fat in my diet that day. But having it all be really just high quality, and I'm huge on the source of food because, yes, it's definitely a little more expensive to do it this way, but when you actually pay attention to how that animal was raised or where the vegetables came from and how they were processed and all that, then it's a difference in how I feel. Like, I literally can tell that my system's running a little bit cleaner. And even when we just went to New Zealand, we went on a training trip. All of their meat is grass-fed. It's so cool. They don't even know what grass-fed is because you are driving down the road. We were on the North Island, and it's a very farm island, and there's just cows and sheep all on the side of the road eating this grass, and you just know that when you go and buy it, that's the best animal that you're getting. You're getting the one that was, raised well. And when we were talking to some of the girls, we're just like, I can't believe how cheap everything is here, and it's grass fed. Like, what is grass fed? It's just so funny to me. So that's made a really big difference. I think just eating well, paying attention to our hydration, sleep. I always was good at sleeping, but now I just kind of pay attention to that more. It's really important for us to hit 9 to 10 hours a night. We really are pretty diligent about that, and then when we can, we get naps in as well. I have a couple other protocols that I use as well. I mean, mobility is actually a big part of our recovery. When we finish the session and go ahead and do mobility right away, we're resetting those muscles and joints again to recover in the right position. So if you get tight while you're out there in the boat and your hip flexors are, in that flex position over and over because you're sitting, let's open them back up so that as we recover, they can actually get back to full length as we're in between sessions. And then I also really love this device called the Mark Pro. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's an electrical stimulation device. A little bit of an investment, but that's been really huge for my training as well. I use it every day. It's basically a recovery tool. It flushes your system. You put these little pads on your muscles, and it pumps your legs and gets all the waste out and flushes good blood in. And I notice a big improvement on my recovery time when I use that.
Wow. That's cool. I'm gonna have to. I've heard of that. I'm gonna check it out a little bit more now that you've mentioned it. But very cool to hear the big impact that diet has had. And again, the theme of quality in the food. So quality training, quality skill, quality whole foods. So can you talk a little bit about your recent trip to New Zealand?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, it was amazing. What a cool country. This was the second trip I've gotten to take there. I got to go in the winter of 2015, and then I went again this winter, which is actually their summer. And that's part of the reason why we went, is because, it's cold here, but then also that what I was talking about before with the training center, these girls get to go up against each other every day in the pair. We want to have the opportunity for a chunk of time every year to do the same thing. And New Zealand is one of those countries that I think is just so confident in their own training and their own plan and level of success that they are not threatened by another boat coming in and asking to do some of that training with them. So we were really lucky and got to link up with the women's sweep coach, Dave Thompson, who pretty much just let us become one of the pairs in their training group. And that meant going out for rows with them almost every morning, and except for the mornings that we chose to go off and do our own skill work to slow things down by ourselves. We got to do a lot of racing against them in practice, and then we got to go up against them in 2 regattas that they use for their selection in naming their Olympic team. So it's fun for us because you get to see how a different country does it. You get to see what works for them and what about that might work for you. And then it's also kind of fun to be like, oh, actually, I think we're doing this thing a little bit better than they're doing right now, and we're going to just hang on to that. But yeah, we made a lot of friends, and I think that this trip allowed us to just fine-tune more about our racing plan, almost like re-remember who we are as racers, and what works for us, and then what things now have we developed better than last time around. So it was a really great trip. I would love to go back again. It's a great group.
Very cool. So I have to ask, since you were in New Zealand, did you get to check out the Shire where Lord of the Rings is filmed?
I did, actually.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
so we went and saw all the little hobbit houses and went to the Green Lantern. Yeah, it was pretty fun.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about your experience, when you were there training with the New Zealand team, what are some of the differences in their approach to, the just training? How do they do it?
So some things are very similar to the way that we train. Some things are very different. A lot of what they do is actually not too far off of what the US Training Center does. I think the biggest difference is that their group is really small. They keep it tight. So they just named their team yesterday, and only 4 women that were training with the sweep group did not make the Olympic team. And that's only because they're doubling their pair into their 8. It was looking like there was only going to be 2 women that didn't make it, but there ended up being 4. So they just keep their group really small, and I think that allows them to use their resources well with the athletes that are there. They also mostly only row once a day, 6 days a week, and they cycle a lot. So pretty much every afternoon they're going out and they're getting more of their aerobic work on their road bikes, which they love and they seem to be getting a lot of good training out of. There's also a decent amount of accidents out there, so that's something that we decided not to join in on. But that's, I think, the biggest thing that they do is that they just get a lot of that good aerobic work in by not having to take it all as a rowing stroke. They are probably only doing about half of that in the rowing stroke. They also spend some time in the gym, but I think it's very different than what we're doing. One thing that I did hear that was pretty cool is that Emma Twigg, who spent last year away from New Zealand rowing because she was in school, she kind of discovered CrossFit as well. And so now she's been doing CrossFit type lifting. And the Canadian women's single sculler came to train with her down in New Zealand as well. And they were doing some of those workouts together. So I think that's kind of cool because everybody on the New Zealand team saw Emma come back even fitter than she has ever been before, and now using some of that training, and it's showing in her rowing as well. But yeah, I think that would be the biggest stuff. They just get really, really good at taking the same kind of stroke at steady state as they're going to take at race pace. So I think that would be the biggest thing that we took away from them is that you take your steady state strokes for a reason. You're taking it to slow down the stroke, to ingrain the habit so that when you go to race pace, you can do the exact same thing. You're not supposed to change it all that much just because you're going harder. And they're very, very good at that.
Yeah, I love it. You're just moving a little bit faster, and the intensity it has changed. Mm-hmm. You could say the same thing on land if you're going from, a deadlift to a kettlebell swing or a clean. It's the foundation underneath is still the same. The movement might change a little bit and the speed, but there's a lot of carryover there.
Exactly.
Very, very cool. Okay, so let's move into some of the rapid fire, some of the fun questions here for you.
Oh, man.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, so you already hit on one of them when I asked you about 10 years ago how you would change your training. So we got that one out of the way. So next question would be, what's your favorite strength training exercise?
Back squats. I'm really good at them. I have bow legs and probably like shorter legs for my body proportion than most people, so it's probably a little unfair, but I love to back squat.
Awesome. Okay. So, given your knowledge, your experience, all right, what piece of advice, if you go back in time and talk to Sarah 10 years ago as a college freshman at Princeton, what advice would you give Sarah 10 years ago?
Not to stress so much about the process, just to kind of enjoy the journey. I look back at my college rowing time and think like, oh my gosh, what a blast that was. Like, why did I let myself get so worried about everything all the time? Like obviously the academics are a part of that. You have to balance that with your sports, which is tricky, but such a fun part of your life. So I would just basically try to tell myself to appreciate those moments a little bit more and, take some of the punches in stride.
Very cool. Well, I hope others can put that to good use. Okay. So what's one thing that high school or junior athletes should be doing more of to complement their training and health?
I think you have to go find a strength trainer if that's not already part of your regimen through the boathouse. if I were back in high school right now, I would be supplementing my sessions at the boathouse where we were rowing and erging with somebody local that could teach me to move in the gym. And it doesn't have to be crazy over the top. I think you just have to lay the foundation, and you have to allow yourself to just start building that strength from an early age. I think I've had my little sister do that. She is a freshman at Michigan right now, and it's been actually really fun to be able to use her as a guinea pig to do some of the things that we're doing now at the elite level. And we had her do that over the summer leading into her season, was just get used to doing different movements. You're going to be on the erg enough when you get to college. So do something else to balance your body out, to learn how to move well, and to make sure that you have the strength to be that foundation for when your volume does come up if you enter a program like that.
Yeah, so important to make sure that you're laying that foundation, and just when you're younger, just focusing on development.
Mm-hmm. I would say absolutely.
So building upon that, do you have any like recommendations or things that they should be looking for when they try to seek out a strength trainer to make sure that it's a good match for them?
Well, I would say look at who they've worked with in the past, who these strength trainers have worked with. Do they understand the sport of rowing? You don't have to be a rower, but I think it's a good thing to understand the movement, just so that when the gym movements are explained to you, maybe it can be translated into rowing terms as well. That is something that I've seen has been really helpful for my younger sister. And I think just kind of try to talk to them about what their philosophies are before you get started. You know, are they just going to try to make you really strong, or are they going to try to teach you about your body and how it's supposed to move, and quality over quantity.
Awesome. Okay, here's a fun one. So what's one book everyone should read?
David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, I would say.
That's a great one.
Really great one. Yeah, that was such a great book for me to read in the middle of some tough training cycle stuff, because I have felt like an underdog in a lot of situations, and to kind of read a book like that can display you even more what an advantage you might have as an underdog, and that even though you might be looked at like you have a disadvantage, you actually have a secret advantage. I think that was a pretty cool message of that book.
Awesome. All right, final one. So in your knowledge, your experience, as an athlete, what's one myth or kind of fallacy you found to just not be true, whether it's been through something you've read or something someone has told you that, through your own experiences, you found it to just not hold true to that?
That's a tricky one, but okay, here's one thing. It's kind of specific. I once had a coach tell me that the dumbest drill they had ever seen was feet out. And I would actually argue now the opposite of that. That would be a myth. I think feet out is one of the most valuable rowing tools that you can do, because what it does is it teaches you to time your leg drive, your body swing, and your arm draw so that you are connected to the foot plate the entire time. If your feet come off, you have lost connection. And so I think the reason why this coach had told me that they didn't like it and it was a bad drill was because they thought, you never really row with these robotic straight legs like that when you have your feet in. There's more fluidity to it than that. And that's true, but if you can understand how to keep your connection with the boat, which is the thing that you're trying to move in the first place, I think it can give you a huge advantage.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a big fan of feet out rowing, and I think that goes back to your earlier point that it's a skill, and I think one of the things that can be discouraging at times is when you go to try something like that, you just you could potentially catch a crab and flip the boat or fall off the erg. it's not something you're necessarily going to be good at immediately, and it really forces you to slow down. It's humbling.
Absolutely. I mean, I could not do it when we first started. Sarah and I had spent about 6 months up in Boston working with Charlie Butt, the Harvard coach, and that's one of his favorite things is the feet out. And I was so bad at it in the beginning, and he had asked us, do you guys ever do feet out work? And I said, no. And he said, why? I said, well, because I'm terrible at it. And I realized that is a really bad answer as to why you shouldn't do something, right? Like if you're bad at something, like go and work on it, challenge yourself, because it's just going to make you more well-rounded. And I think it's taken me until now, so like 10 months or so, to be able to actually now do almost like full race pace work with my feet out. But that has allowed me to realize how quickly each of my body parts are supposed to be moving.
That's so cool. Yeah. And you just own it now. You own that movement.
Or I'm better at it a little bit, still working on it.
Spoken like a true student. There's always progress to be made. I love it.
Well, that's the only reason I think I'm still rowing. There is always something new to learn. And I feel like I'm close maybe to reaching some of that potential that I've been like seeking, but that's the most fun part, is just unlocking these new skills, these new lessons on a daily basis.
Beautiful. Well, Sara, this has been an absolute blast. I really enjoyed listening to all the information and knowledge you've shared and getting to know you a little bit over the last hour. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything with the world.
No problem. I mean, I'm happy to share it. And you're probably the first person who I've really kind of gone this in depth with and been this open with. So you're welcome.
Cool. No, I appreciate it. It's good stuff. It's awesome. So just hang on the line. Let me give you a proper goodbye, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.